After dumping Mr. Bully and flying to study abroad. Mr. Bully, he beat his chest and howled with grief. 3 years later, when I returned to China, he was already accompanied by a pure and lovely little white flower. He said coldly to me, "This is my new girlfriend. We are very loving. More than love you." Did not wait for him to finish. His own sister behind him kicked him hard. What to pretend? Flying out of the country twice a week to sneak a peek at someone else's dog? After 3 years of separation. I heard that Ogayeme has changed his temperament. Becoming a cold-faced boss. No longer the little crybaby I know. To be honest, I still look forward to it a little. But his stupid behavior of pulling his own sister to show love in front of me, in a vain attempt to stimulate me, is always emphasizing to me that the star is still the same star. And the fool is still the same fool. I hate the iron is not steel forehead. I and you are childhood sweethearts. I and your sister is not growing up together. Do you think my head was kicked by a donkey or pinched by a door in these 3 years abroad? And I don't recognize anyone when I come back? Ogayeme's eyes lit up. So you admit that you and I are childhood friends? Domenica held his forehead and sighed. Exquisite good-looking face are almost wrinkled into a pimple face. Do not pay attention to him. He heard that you want to come back. So happy that he did not sleep for a week. He was originally not high IQ, you know. Coupled with sleep deprivation. Basically almost become a fool. I let out a long sigh. You and your aunt and uncle have worked really hard for so many years. Domenica took the luggage from my hand and threw it to Ogayeme. Mom and Dad are also very happy that you came back. Let the nanny make a table of dishes. All of which you love to eat. Just waiting to give you a welcome. My heart was also warmed by what I heard. My name is Ilaria. Our family and the Gu family is a family friend. But not more than the Gu family focus on the education of the heir. Our family's attitude towards me is to live on. Mom and Dad fly around all year round. I have more than half of the time was fostered in the Gu family. If I want to mention my parents, then the fuzzy face of my mom and dad. The first thing that comes to my mind is instead the parents of the Gu family. They have watched me grow up since I was a child. And they also love me as their own daughter. I haven't seen them for more than 3 years. And the 2 elders pulled me down to ask about me. And Gu's mom even shed a couple of tears. And it took a lot of persuasion to persuade her to stop. In this happy scene, a cold-faced boss sitting on the sofa looking happy. Emitting low pressure. See, no one cares. He can only from time to time issue a hum. To improve the sense of existence. However, still no one cares about him. No one even greeted him to eat. He can only grade to sit on the dining table. Without a word to the mouth to pick sweet and sour pork. I don't blame him for dumping me. After all, 3 years ago, he was crying and begging me. Didn't leave me behind. I resolutely dumped him and boarded the cross-country airplane. Ogayeme lowered his head and bit hard at the sweet and sour pork, glaring at me with eyes full of grief. Like the abandoned housewife, my heart is mixed with a trace of speechlessness. Suddenly heard Domenica open her mouth again and ask, "Ilaria, what do you plan to do next?" I gently put down my chopsticks, drew a napkin, and wiped my mouth. I have no intention of leaving this time when I return to China. I intend to develop in the country. Ogayeme hummed. I could hear that he wanted to express his dissatisfaction. But because he was so happy, his tail tone went up, sounding like the funny sound made by a zuka flute. Ogayeme couldn't suppress the smile at the corners of his mouth. And still spoke in a beatific manner. 3 years ago I begged you to stay. But now if you still want to come to our company, then I'll have to think about it. Domenicus at close. A slap on the direct split up. Talk too much, mouth cheap. Dinner cannot plug your mouth. On the face of his parents are present. I still smiled and talked to him. Which dog's ear did you hear that I want to work under your hand? Ogayeme eyes glared. Then where are you going? You can't run a business with a third-rate company every day. Can you? I went abroad to study game production. And the Gu family's Shinki is the leading company in the industry. So it's normal for him to think so. However, I didn't. I smiled and responded. I came back with an independent studio. And the site has been chosen. And will soon be ready to start work. These 3 years I was abroad. Is to study. Is also entrepreneurship. My studio named Fireworks. Although the studio is understaffed. But the victory is that everyone is elite. The team once developed a small single-player game. With beautiful painting style, and top-notch plot as the main selling point. Won a lot of awards in foreign countries. Is also considered to be a small international fame. Guy has been paying attention to my dynamics over the years. So he should know about all this. But he still skimmed his lips and muttered in a small voice, "What kind of game can such a small studio make? Isn't it just a joke? Uncle Auntie." I smiled and looked at the Gu family's parents. Asking for instructions. Can I hit him? His mouth is too cheap. After a meal. I thanked the Gu family parents to stay in my good intentions. Gu mother is quite a bit of regret. The family room are still you keep it. I heart warm. Sweet smile. Next time to come back to properly accompany you. Now just back to China. The studio side of things. Cannot leave people. Before I went back to China. I chose a good venue. It's not a big place. But it's in a good location. And I just finished the basic setup. I've just finished the basic setup here. And suddenly an unexpected guest came to my door. "Who is Ilaria?" she asked. But she was staring straight at me. The visitor's wavy hair fell to her waist. Parted in front of her chest. A white professional dress tightly wrapped around her exquisite body. Stepping on 10 centimeters of hate skyge in an attempt to show an air of strength from her height. Gada. Guy Ma's assistant. Is also our high school classmate. Gada. With a high and mighty look on her face. Was twirling her hair around her delicate fingers while casting a provocative glance at me. The people in the studio looked back at me. And I waved my hand to indicate that they should do what they were doing and not be bothered. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her. Gada frowned and walked towards me. Her heels clicking on the floor. I remain oblivious and she can't help herself. Tapping her knuckles lightly on my desktop. "Ilaria." I grunted. "I thought you didn't recognize me?" Gada took a deep breath. But still managed to hold it down. Not to argue with me. But pose high. "I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here on behalf of the Starry Apocalypse. To talk about cooperation with Flame." I nodded my head and waved my hand as if I were a man of the world. I nodded and waved my hand like I was driving away flies. "I'll think about it. Please go back." Gada snorted coldly. Looming over me. With the addition of high heels. Condescending, holding her chest and looking at me. 3 years later. "You're still so self-possessed. You still think you're the heavenly maiden from back in the day? Don't blame me for not reminding you. Fireworks is just a small studio. Starlight is the industry leader. You want to stand firm in the country. This cooperation must be seized." I continue to pack my things. To talk about cooperation. Show sincerity. Soldier to soldier. Either you go to my assistant to talk. Or you let Guy come to me. Gada hummed and laughed. Revealing a look of "Really so? You really still have old feelings for Mr. Gu, As long as you catch the opportunity. You want to climb. Nowadays are not the same as in the old days. Is Mr. Gu something that you can see just because you want to see him?" I glared at her. Then took out my cell phone and dialed the phone. The phone was quickly connected. I did not say nonsense. "Come over." After hanging up the phone. I pinched my watch to keep track of the number. Gada was still there sneering. Guy pushed the door in a dusty manner. Half an hour away. He arrived in 20 minutes. A layer of fine beads of sweat on his forehead. But his eyes are bright. "You want me?" Gada stared in disbelief. I laughed softly. Walked in front of her. Close to her ear. Coincidence. Guy is really what I want to see. Guy seemed to have just noticed that there was someone else next to him. And his external persona was still that of a high-cooled bully. Total. Just showed too much happiness, is more or less a little embarrassed. Red face, coughed twice. But still colorful. The strength of the fireworks I am also considered to have an understanding of. Personally come is also on behalf of the attention of the starlight. I do not deny that this is indeed an excellent opportunity for Flame to gain a firm foothold in the country. Ah Guy Ma pulled the chair. Sat down in front of me. Our table has not been confiscated, clean debris roughly piled to one side. But also seriously, and he chatted about cooperation. The project that Starlight wanted to cooperate on was simple to say the least. To put it bluntly, they wanted to outsource the art portion of a small game to Flame. Which is what Flame specializes in. Flame's artwork is something I have learned. This small game volume is not big. For your studio, it is not a difficult task. The compensation is good to talk about. You will not lose. And with the influence of the Starlight in the country. But also let Flame's name in a short period of time no one knows. For you is all the benefits and no harm. Ah Guy Ma introduced very seriously. Even pious. Almost begged me to cooperate with him. I can also see that he is disguised in helping me. The light in his eyes was too hot for me to refuse. It's just that Gata is really dishonest. We are talking about cooperation. She suddenly put her hand on Og Iama's shoulder and said softly with her voice, Mr. Gu, are you tired? I'll give you a squeeze. The naked eye can see Og Iama's body shuddered. As if electrocuted, general popping away. Frowning. Said no. The words were just a refusal. And the tone was like a reprimand. Gata is not discouraged. And poured a cup of water for Og Iama. After all, it is a small studio. The tea is also so shabby. Mr. Gu. You are afraid that you are not accustomed to drink. First drink some water. I laughed coldly. This got a moment to Og Ian, a pinch legs and shoulders. A moment in that acidic words. To put it bluntly is in the dark. She just put on that condescending attitude. I can tell that she doesn't want Flame and Starlight to reach a cooperation. To put it more clearly, she doesn't want me to have too much contact with Og Iama. I have a good temper and I don't want to bother with her in general. But I can't resist her repeated provocations. Taking advantage of Og Iama to go to the bathroom work. Gata directly danced to my face. You think Gu always how much you take you seriously. Will receive your phone call rush too? Don't flatter yourself. After 3 years of not seeing each other. Mr. Gu's heart has long since gone without you. Look at me again. I've been with him day and night for 3 years. The two of us have been together longer than anyone else. We've been family for a long time. We're close. Our love is stronger than gold. Even if you were a fly, you couldn't sting this seamless egg. Gata looked at me with a provocative look in her eyes, flaunting an intimacy that was completely non-existent. I couldn't stand it anymore. And after a moment of silence, I straightened up. Gata took 2 wary steps back. What are you doing? I rolled my eyes. What are you afraid of? I'm not going to hit her with my hands. Og Iama came in from the door, and saw the scene of confrontation. Just a little shocked. I reached out and picked up Og Iama's collar. Pressed his head as a kiss. He was horrified. He panicked. He closed his eyes and enjoyed it. She's surprised. She's angry. She's gritting her teeth. After a long kiss and a parting of the mouth, I wiped my mouth and stared at Gata with burning eyes. Is there anything else to say? Gata seems to be tongue-tied. Og Iama is red in the face. Her hands cover her face. And a buzzing sound comes out from her fingers. Gata. You go back to the company first. Mr. Gu. Gata was reluctant. But there was nothing he could do. And before he left, he gouged me out fiercely. My heart is free. Turn around to see Og Iama squatting in a small corner, burying his whole face in his hands. Even the roots of his ears are so red that they are dripping blood. I was just about to laugh at him, as thin-skinned as ever, when I saw that his shoulders seemed to be shaking slightly. Holy shit. Teasing and crying again? I hurriedly went to pick at his hand, and I saw that his eyes were teary. The tip of his nose was red. And he was staring at me with a pair of slightly angry eyes. his thick nasal voice thick with aggravation. Ilaria, why do you always like to play with my feelings? Ilaria, why do you always like to play with my feelings? That's what he used to say. Even back then when we formalized our relationship together. He was crying and asking me why I always like to play with his feelings. In fact, it wasn't me who was toying with him. It was clearly him who was being a bitch. I was dropped off at a very young age by my parents at Gu's home. And then transferred to the same school as him. In the same age of the children naughty and playful. I already have beyond the age of understanding. Because other kids had parents to back them up when they got into trouble. Whereas my parents were too busy making money to care about me. And I was too much of a parasite to cause trouble for my aunts and uncles. Back then, I built myself a high wall in my mind and was polite and distant to everyone until Ima noticed me. How was I going to dislike him? He stood up for me and beat the snot out of the kid who lifted my skirt. He took me on a ride and made me hold onto his hand on a pirate ship. He complimented me on my intelligence. Always with a wave of infatuation and admiration, watching my every move with penetrating silly eyes. He practically kicked away the brick-by-brick wall of my heart and grabbed my hand and moved forward, draped in sunshine, pulling me into it as well. So I confessed my love to him. But he was guilty. He was obviously so happy that his tail went up to the sky. And he was so happy that he couldn't find his way out of the room while saying something like, "Then this Lord will mercifully consider it." The young girl in love with the young girl rummed up how much courage to express their love in front of their favorite person. In exchange for such a result, there is a little bit of loss in the heart. The rest of all the gnashing of teeth and resentment. Then forget it. I gambled and responded. Anyway. I just casually asked "You do not agree I will go to find someone else." He froze in place in a flash. I also realized that his speech is a bit impulsive. Just wanted to apologize. But saw his face red. Tears falling down. At that time he also asked me these words, "Ilaria, why do you always like to play with my feelings?" Once upon a time that affectionate single white shirt teenager, and now this suit decent cold-faced boss overlap each other. The same hot tears but along that already mature and resolute face continue to roll down. I can't help but sigh. Some things no matter how long it takes are still the same as they once were. Regardless. It was indeed my fault for dragging someone over and kissing them without even saying hello. I cleared my throat and was just about to comfort Ima when I saw him wiping away his tears. Holding a reindeer-like red nose. Gritting his teeth and wriggling away. "I'm done talking about work. I'm going back to the office to get my assistant to squeeze my shoulders and make me some tea. See you later." I also laughed with gritted teeth. Looking at his back and cursing angrily in my heart. This dead arrogant. Ima angry to angry. About the cooperation still did not fall. Detailed cooperation content quickly sent to my mailbox. The game is mainly a puzzle. Similar to a maze game. Based on which a plot is added. It's just that the plot. The more I read about it. The more wrong it got. A protagonist has had a crush on a girl boarding in his house since he was a child. And has followed her all the way. But she has fled all the way. From her house to her school. From the flower store to the airport. And has managed to clear so many hurdles. And then the final ending is that the girl leaves on an airplane. And the protagonist can't catch up with her. So he can only cry and weep bitterly. I don't care about the suspicion of accusation. But what kind of ending is this? I thought so. So I called and asked. And Ima's answer was obviously a little bit sad. "You think so too, don't you? What kind of ending is this?" I was silent. And sure enough, he was just pointing the finger. Ima obviously have been through so many difficulties. Said to be together through thick and thin. The result is good. Without saying a word. A fly to foreign countries. Is 2 or 3 years do not know whether to come back. This ending. I hurriedly interrupted his whining. This ending we can change. Ima on the other end of the phone is obviously short of breath. I can imagine. He clenched his fists with 2 eyes glowing. "Look, really? Of course. It's not that difficult. We can even preserve the original plot to a great extent. And just a little bit of tweaking at the end will make it even better. I thought about it, and then added. Of course. Is to add money. You said the game's ending could be changed. I seemed to hear the sound of a broken heart on the other end of the phone, accompanied by Agayame's angry growl. Whatever. I hate you. You're a cold and emotional as woman. And then he hung up. So he accepted this offer to crank up the budget and then ask us to help change the plot. Right? In the evening, I got another call. But instead of Agayame, it was Domenica. Ilaria. Do you want to come to our house to see Agayame? Domenica's tone was full of a helplessness that carried a bloodline of dislike. Actually, he's no big deal. And he ate 2 extra bowls of rice in the evening. But he asked me to tell you that he's sobbing inconsolably and has locked himself in his room to go on a hunger strike. Agayame shouted from the other end of the phone. Sis. Don't tear me down. You are my own sister. I sighed and said I would be there. After all, the ideas for game improvement had been thought out. And it would be good to talk clearly with him in person. When I arrived at Goo's house, Domenica was sitting on the couch watching TV. I greeted her. She didn't raise her eyelids for a second, naturally lifting her chin and pointing to Agayame's room. Coming? Mom and Dad are out. He's in his room. I thanked her and headed for the second floor. Knocking on Agayame's door. A half-dead voice came from the room. Don't knock. I'm not in. Me. Oh. I'll go then. The door swished open. Quickly, Agayame stood in the doorway biting her lip. Her eyes tearful and aggrieved. You won't even coax me a little? You just do whatever you want because I like you. You bad woman. Yes. 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 You are right. I numbly nodded my head, pushed him away and headed for the room, then pulled out the prepared folder. Finished? Finished coming to see the direction of the plot rectification. There's nothing wrong with it, we can do it. Agayame was very resistant. Is work the only thing in your eyes? Am I no better than work in your eyes? I'm never going to smile again. I'm going to punish you by becoming a cold and emotional person, so that you'll regret it and hug me and cry and beg me to give you another expression. I am really a little tired to cope with. Rubbed his temples. Cannot wait a little while before making a scene? Let's talk about the work first. The studio is still waiting for an accurate message to do it. Agayame deflated mouth held half a day. Muttered in a small voice. Then you first praise me. I was surprised for a moment. What do you mean? Agayame obviously said this on the energy. I have been working very hard. In these 3 years everyone has been praising me. Saying that I have grown. Saying that it is great that I can hold up a company by myself. But I have never heard you praising me. It's obvious that I've been working my ass off for you. I froze slightly. And inevitably my gaze softened a few points. I know how hard Agayame has worked these past 3 years. Starlight is such a big company. Managed in a well-organized manner. Never made any mistakes. Has always been steady. This for Agayame, this born to the company's things without a trace of interest in the person. Has been very difficult. You're really good. I took a deep breath and made my gaze look as sincere as possible. Seriously. Agayame's eyes light up. Can I ask for a reward then? Reward? I froze slightly and subconsciously clutched my chest and took half a step back. Staring at Agayame warily. What reward? I hadn't forgotten that this was in his bedroom. It turns out I'm still thinking dirty. Agayame just wanted me to accompany him to the party as his date. 3 years ago they all laughed at me. Saying I didn't get you. That you couldn't stand me. And now I'm going to take you out and shut everyone up. Agayame seemed to be fantasizing about that image already. And couldn't help but giggle out loud. My comment, childish and boring. Seeing that Agayame was about to start playing the rogue again. I hastily blocked his words, but I'll still accompany you if you want to. For me. Agayame's tail is almost up in the air. But he still can't change his stubbornness. But if you're willing to marry me in situ, I'd consider a proposal process instead of a DAW. After all, I've said before that I'll definitely marry you. 3 years ago. And it still works now. Getting more and more out of line. I threw a pillow at him, frowned, threw the door to his room with a slam, and walked away quickly. That's leaving? Domenica, who was sitting on the couch, greeted me and smiled at me. Your ears are red. Are they? I reached out to touch them, and they were indeed rolling. Oops. Forgot to ask him about adjusting the direction. TCH, forget it. Let's change it in this direction. If he dares not like it, I'll break his legs. When it came to the day of the party, I dressed up specially and Domineering offered to drive me, which I refused. I am mainly afraid of his excitement. Really go to get a length and Lincoln, and not Mary Sue novels. Engaged in so exaggerated. Really will make people like a needle. Besides, I have my own car. I can drive it myself. When I got to the venue, I found a place where no one was around, and took small sips of champagne while waiting for Domineering. In fact, I seldom participate in this kind of activities. It's nothing more than a group of false feelings of people. Fake polite. Face hanging is a smile. Words hidden is a knife. Boring very much. As a matter of fact, the banquet just started on someone recognized me. Two just pointing at a distance. Even if it is. But some of the good thing to fling to push and shove in front of me. Smiling with a sneer. You are Ilaria. Is that the daughter of the general manager of the Jong? I bowed my head, pursed my lips and watched them, exchanging words and laughing frequently. I knew what they were laughing at. 3 years ago, my parents were involved in a scam. And in a blur, they were the ones at fault, and went to jail. Earlier in the year is also a powerful figure in the shopping mall. Busy most of his life's blood hitching in even if, but also put himself into the jail. Cannot become the joke of the whole circle. The visitor is obviously a long-winded woman. Cover the face snickering even if. But also had to pull me. I heard that the 3 years you are abroad? I said to the outside world that I was going to study abroad. But I don't think I went to avoid the storm. Right? Why did you come back? Your parents are getting out of jail? Before I could say anything, Dominering's voice suddenly came from behind me. What are you talking about? Yo. Isn't this Mrs. Shenho? Your son who cheated on you and had his leg broken by his ex-wife. How have you been? Recently the rain and smoke lingering. Easy rheumatism. Have to let the nanny carefully care for it. I looked up to see. But the light was lost in the eyes. Only to see the silhouette of the shadows. Squinting and then looked carefully. Domineering that pair of peach eyes slightly narrowed. Thin lips pursed. Seemingly smiling. Out of thin air gave birth to a coldness that seems to reject people outside, but also seems to carry a natural defiance. He gently put his arm around my shoulder, seemingly in the manifestation to give me backing. Was poked and prodded through the pain of public. Mrs. Shen obviously face becomes not good, but seems to be not dare in the face of Domineering seizure. With a smile pulled a couple of home. Pulling the little sister to avoid the plague like fleeing away. Domineering snorted. Whispered to me, do not have to be put on the heart. They are not living in pain. They have to look at other people are not living well. In order to balance some of them. Like rats in the gutter. It is not worth the trouble. I nodded my head with some hindsight. Amazed at Dominering's appearance of seeing through the cold and warmth of people. This is Dominering's rumored cold-faced overlord form. Isn't it? It's indeed very different from the Domineering I remember. It's also kinda handsome. He had a smile on his face. But he refused to let people in. And when many people at the party rushed to flatter him, he handled it with grace and ease. Spoke thoughtfully and without mistakes. So that no one could find a single fault. And was even able to distract himself from helping me hold my drink. I took a sip of champagne and watched Domineering laughing and joking with a couple of old foxes. This cry-baby really has grown up to be on her own where I can't see her. Suddenly the music changes. Agayeme walks slowly to my side, gently removes the glass from my hand and hands it to a waiter carrying a tray. Then slowly bows and reaches out to me. I froze for a moment before I realized that he was asking me to dance. He whispered to me, "Don't worry. I have secretly practiced well. Will not step on your feet again." I couldn't help but smile at the contrast between his words and his image. And I gently took his hand and slid onto the dance floor with the music. I have to say, he was really skilled, just slightly stiff in his limbs, and didn't seem too comfortable wrapping his arms around my waist. I took advantage of the noisy music to ask him in a low voice, "Did you practice with your hands up to the air?" "Probably," was said. He blushed slightly. At first I asked my sister to help, but she disliked me stepping on her feet all the time, jumped twice and then did not help me. I snorted out a laugh. He embarrassed but hard, not allowed to laugh at me. "I'm very hardworking. Praise me. You're so awesome." I laughed. It really took a lot of work. After all, the party was just a small interlude. It was soon over. And work was the main event. I've been running around a lot during this time. After all, I'm on a tight schedule. And there's a lot of things that we both need to discuss and work on together. Gotta as an assistant. As long as you get the right opportunity, you have to give me a little bit of trouble. But the most she can do is to verbally offend a couple of sentences. I don't even bother to think about it. One day, I washed my face in the Starbucks restroom. Gotta suddenly came to my side. From the bag to find the lipstick and foundation. In the mirror. As if in makeup. She looked at herself in the mirror. As if in a mumble. But said to me, "People, it is important to have self-awareness. Some things do not belong to themselves. Even if they rush will not be their own." I nodded, yes. If like some people have been immersed in their own fantasies, thinking that everything is in control. But in fact no one took her seriously. It would be too embarrassing. Got a cold snort. Not pretend. Close the foundation issued a snap sound. Hands on the chest staring straight at me. "You're nothing but my defeat. 3 years ago I can force you out of the country. Today you still not my opponent. We'll see. You are just a defeated man of mine. 3 years ago I could force you out of the country. Today you are still not my opponent. We'll see. Let me see what you have learned in the past 3 years in foreign countries. You'll see. There's only one woman by his side. And that's me." After saying that, she left the restroom with her toes in the air. And I froze for a moment as I looked at her back. How could she think that she was the one who forced me out of the country? I couldn't help but hold my forehead and laugh bitterly. This is really a heavenly misunderstanding. An ugly oops. It seems that my overly decisive decision back then, in addition to hurting Ayame's young heart, also left a not so small misinterpretation in the hearts of the others. So much so that I actually made such a misunderstanding. No wonder she'd been so fanatically confident. This meeting was like Gata blowing the horn of attack, marking her to launch a powerful offensive. Circling Ayame went to Fusertion just about growing on him. As for how I know this, of course Ayame told me himself. Of course. The conclusion was summed up by me. And Ayame's exact words were, "Do you think my assistant is crazy? Or is she not awake from drinking fake alcohol? This morning, she took a cup of coffee and threw it on top of my clothes. And then came up to pickpocket my clothes afterward." I said no several times. But she looked like she couldn't hear me. And I was yelling at the security guards to pull her away. I was so close to letting the security guards throw her off the second floor. I couldn't help but snicker. It's not a matter of Gata being in charge or not in charge or not in charge, or not in charge. It's a matter of simply being useless. Ayame has been complaining to me about Gata more and more often. At first I took it as a joke. But gradually I got tired of it. So I suggested sincerely, "Why don't you fire her? And have some time to spare. So that you don't have to torment each other." And Ayame rejected my proposal. How could that be possible? My assistant can't be replaced by just anyone. She doesn't need to be paid. She's working for me for nothing. No wonder. I couldn't help but spit out, working for nothing? Aren't you afraid she's a commercial spy? I am May. I'm afraid. That's why I don't even let her do forms. She only does odd jobs like carrying water and mopping and cleaning. She only does miscellaneous work such as carrying water and mopping the floor to clean. And she does it diligently. And our company has never hired a cleaning lady. So you don't know how much money we save. Good for you. People want to be your dog lickers. But you treat them like animals. I guess Gata is still complacent that his frequent demonog Ayame did not abandon himself. Must be in his heart there is a place. But do not know that Agayame is simply figured to save money. I can't help but yell at her for paying the wrong price. By the end of the week, Agayame organized the Starlight to carry on the group building. Originally with me is not related. But he had to take me also in the name of the partner. I was happy to go and join in the fun. After all, according to my speculation, after such a long period of high-frequency demonic behavior, Gata probably can't hold back and will soon launch a general attack. Right? Sure enough. The moment I saw Gata I knew that today was destined to be an extraordinary night. After all, under normal circumstances, a woman named assistant, actually a cleaning aunt, is not going to wear so deep V dress. It was almost enough to see the navel. Gata obviously also noticed that I was sizing her up, and nonchalantly held up her own proud bosoms, flaunting them at me, as if they were already bound and determined. I said I would wait and see. In fact, the reunion is just so old. Eat, drink and sing K. After a full meal, the box suppressed for a long time programmers topped with a shiny brain, shining in the spotlight, shouting at the top of his lungs, horsehoofs to the south of the people looking north. Granted, there just wasn't a word in tune, but the point was majestic. I glanced back, and sure enough, Gata was already pretending to be drunk, and making a move to jump into Ayame's arms. Ayame was just dodging. But when she saw my gaze, she immediately shook with a tiger's body and instantly flashed, pulling away a distance of 5 meters. And Gata fell straight to the ground. Ayame completely ignored her. Hands up high. As if to prove his innocence shouted at me, I did not touch her. Really? She hard to me. It is she who touched the porcelain. I patted Ayame on the shoulder, signaling him to keep his voice down. It was too embarrassing. But this not so intimate gesture seemed to irritate Gata, who staggered up from the ground, her face full of teardrops, but gritted her teeth and pretended to be stubborn. You do like me, right? She asked as she rushed at Agayame. Don't you dare say you don't have any feelings for me at all. Just say you hate me, and I'll disappear from your life immediately. Agayame's brow knitted into a pimple. He thought twice before hesitantly opening his mouth. Speaking, can we talk about it? It's true that I don't like you. But can you not disappear from my life? Don't pay the cleaning aunt, you know. It's the assistant. Don't pay the assistant is really hard to find. Gata was running out in tears. Ever since that day, Agayame has been beside my ear all day long, saying that he really needs a new assistant. I've been ignoring him, and he's finally reached the bottom of this yen map. Why don't you come and work for me as an assistant? Me, how your last assistant is to take your brain with you to leave together is not it. How much face do you have? Let me, a promising game designer, condescend to go to you as a secretary? Agayame, you can see me up close and personal every day. Laugh it up. Who wants to see that? Although he does have a great body, wrapped in a suit, aesthetic and coloring. But I don't work for him as an assistant. And he wears it for me every day. So I ignored him and focused on my work. Flame was always surprisingly efficient. And we soon had to advance clips, which I took to Agayame, along with a little bit of our input on the game. I suggested that the game harvest special props in the process of cracking levels, and that when all the special props were collected, hidden levels would open up, and that the real ending could only be reached after passing the hidden levels. Agayame was clearly interested. What's the real ending? Is the girl willing to stay and spend her life with the protagonist? No, the girl gets on the plane anyway. And Dog-I-Ma is instantly discouraged. I turned on my computer and explained to him as I played it. This is a short movie that plays after you pass a hidden level. The short plot is actually very simple. The girl still got on the plane, but looking at the main character crying in pain in the airport. The girl's eyes are also flooded with tears. She only said 2 words. One sentence is "wait for me to come back." One was "I love you." I'm not sure Og-I-Ma got it, but he was obviously greatly shocked. "You said you love me." Me. I was talking about the plot. He wouldn't listen. "You said you love me." I knew nothing good would come out of Og-I-Ma's head, but I still underestimated him. He gave me a whole loud proposal that day, which I really didn't expect. I had just left Starbright in the morning, and in the afternoon, he had invited a bunch of relatives and friends, set up a sea of roses, and right outside the fireworks studio, with a rustic loudspeaker, he shouted over and over again, "Marry me, Ilaria." At least the pigeon egg on the diamond ring was big enough, but I still refused, and scolded him to death. Maybe slightly too hard. And by the time I slowed down, he had started crying on. "You're a liar. You said you liked me this morning. Why do you always like to play with my feelings?" I took a deep breath. If I wanted you to take care of me for the rest of my life, I would have agreed to it 3 years ago. Why wait until now? Gotta did seem to be around Og-I-Ma a lot at that time. But neither Og-I-Ma or I ever invested too much attention in her at all. It wasn't needed. It wasn't worth it. I hadn't cared about her, much less fled the country for her. When my parents went bankrupt and were jailed, I went from being the daughter of a rich family to having nothing overnight. At that time, the tender and youthful teenager solemnly promised that he would marry me to spend his life with me and take care of me for the rest of my life. But I don't want to be his vassal. Moreover, I don't want to be his burden. I know beyond any doubt that without the support of the family, the gap between the two will only grow wider and wider. That's why I want to go abroad. That's why I want to study abroad. I want to become very, very strong. So strong that I can ignore the gulf of the family background, and stand shoulder to shoulder with him, and love each other as equals. Even when Og-I-Ma loved me so much that he couldn't even accept a short parting, saying that he would ignore me for the rest of his life if I dared to leave, and crying his eyes out at the airport, begging me to stay. I was determined to go. I don't need you to take care of me for the rest of my life. I need to be there for each other. A relationship with respect. I took a deep breath. But 3 years ago I didn't have the backbone to say such a thing. At that time you were destined to become the pride of the sky and stand on top of the mountains. And I can only rely on your help to climb up. Parasitic on you, what face I have to talk about independence, talk about autonomy, talk about respect? That's why I left. Not because I don't love you, but on the contrary, precisely because I love you. That's why I left. Og-I-Ma's eyes shone so brightly that I suspected he hadn't even heard the previous paragraph. He yelled at each of them, as if he was carrying a treasure. "Did you hear that? Did you all hear that? She just said she loves me. She just said she loves me. I'm not dreaming. I'm not crazy. She just said she loves me." In her own words. I saw Gu's parents and Domenica holding their foreheads in unison and sighing, and I couldn't help but follow suit. This fool is hopeless.